Return of the Exiled, or Why Must I Be the Hero? By T.J. Stegaheis. Read by Yob. Dedicated to Kurt Reimert, whose stories inspired this work. Requiescat in pace. Chapter 16. Saurian Valley. As they began burying Bud and Riff, Tanner and the rest of his group returned. They looked exhausted, but they were all alive. They had spent the night hiding in a clump of trees, not wanting to encounter goblins in the dark. Sard introduced them to Leo, whom he had once met and to whom he owed a debt of honor. From there they followed the clues north from the swamp and into Korpan. Tanner told them that Korpan was a nation with an interesting history. Originally planned as part of Thanet, it had proven to be uninhabitable. An ancient magical duel had left the land ensorcelled, scorched far beyond repair. Tennard speculated that gods or demons must have been utilized to expend that much magic without the magician's arms falling off. When it finally recovered, the Reverend Mother of the House of Healing claimed rulership. The throne of Thanet had become too weak to protest, and Korpan was born. At the Korpan border they found shelter for the night in a healer's post, a walled complex built to care for travelers. They also were able to trade labor for more food, which cheered them up. They crossed Korpan for 10 days to the mountain wall and a great cliff which ran for miles to the east and west. After some scouting to either side, Smoke spotted a carven face high on the cliff wall. Groton confirmed that it was ancient and meant to be a saurian face. They approached the cliff in line with the face and looked around. From here they could see a concealed path to the right through a few trees and great boulders, then behind an enormous oak tree to a jagged crack in the cliff. A small rock spire stood before the crack, a stone sliver. A shallow river emerged from the immense crack and flowed through the boulders and along the cliff base to the east. It would probably become the river Tenagor. Sard led the way past the spire and into the shadowy cleft. All they could hear was the rushing sound of water falling to the base of the chasm. The water filled the far side of the gap, leaving a stony bank on the near side. As soon as they were all well inside the great crack, Sard pointed to Tanner, and Windy could see a cave mouth across the river, with a dry floor just visible within. The water was cold and shallow and had a firm, gravelly bottom, so they forded it without difficulty. However, as soon as the group stepped into the dark cave, they were quickly surrounded by hooded figures, and a voice demanded to know who they were. Sard, struggling to be heard over the sound of the water, answered that they were travelers following directions given to them. Tanner added that they were from Payden. A leader of the group stepped forward and asked, "Whose face is that on the cliff outside?" "Heason," replied Tanner. "That is right," came the reply, "but I do not think that you all came from Payden." "Yes," shouted Windy, "some of us are from Tor." "Tor!" said the leader, and swords appeared all around them. "On whose side?" Windy had to answer fast. If these were Falcon Legion soldiers, they would probably die whatever the answer. But if these were Mountain Legion men, the truth might get them aid. "We have found out that the Mountain Legion was loyal to King Leopold and framed for his murder," she shouted quickly, and waited to see if they would kill her. "Who is the real king?" he asked her. "If he returns to Tor, Prince Frederick is the rightful king," she replied. The swords were sheathed, and Windy breathed again. "You may pass," he said, "but you may not see where you pass." And they were moved up a slope and into a quieter cave. There they were all quickly blindfolded and linked together with rope. "We will lead you to safely through," said the leader, "and then we will find out if what you say is true, for we have found that humans lie easily." "Humans," thought Windy. "Then what are you?" The leader was too small to be a giant or ogre, too well spoken to be a groll or a troll, and too tall to be either a dwarf or a gnome. Elves, maybe? She thought. They were all about as tall as Riff had been, so not likely to be elves either. The path seemed twisted and long. Sometimes a damp breeze blew past them. Sometimes the air was so stuffy that she thought they would suffocate. Twice something caught her hair, but let it go. Finally, Wendy felt fresh air on her cheeks, and she knew that they had arrived somewhere. The blindfold was removed, and she could see a green valley spread out around them. The cave mouth opened out of a rocky outcropping, and she could see sheer cliff walls further back that way. The valley ran beyond her sight to the left and right, and there was another cliff face in the far distance in front of her. A wide path crossed in front of the cave opening and disappeared into the distance left and right. "Welcome to Chero," said a new voice. "I am Commander Hewlett. If you speak the truth, you will be made welcome. If not—" They all understood the message. The architecture here was quite different from any she had seen before. Ball or dome structures sometimes stuck together to form larger buildings. Towers with round swellings at the top, all with oval doors and round windows. Well-tended fields were here and there. Areas of woodlands and scattered clusters of buildings could be seen. Then Wendy saw the most beautiful building she had ever seen. It was immense and yet delicate. Thin spires and surfaces like the petals of flowers, shades of white and yellow and pink, as well as other colors she had no words for, all somehow blended together like a song or a sunrise. From the highest spire floated a brightly colored flag. "So pretty!" she exclaimed. How she could not find the words for it. "Ah," said the commander responded. "I see that you are admiring our palace. Magnificent, isn't it?" "Yes, magnificent," said Wendy, glad to have a word to describe it. "We have nothing like it back home." She turned around and realized why the others were so quiet. Their guides had removed their hoods and thrown back their cloaks to reveal themselves to be saurians, lizard men. They were scaled in shades of brown and green and black. They had tails, which made them seem even more strange. Unlike the goblins she had seen, their appearance was not unpleasant to her eyes. Although their jaws protruded from their faces and their eyes were further apart than humans, something in the way they moved and responded to each other made them seem graceful, even beautiful. Wendy looked into the gold-flecked eyes of the commander and was startled to see gentleness and intelligence there. She remembered what she had learned about the history of these people and swallowed her fear as best she could. A lifetime of fearing them as monsters had to be overcome. However, since she had put her fate into their hands this far, she might as well commit herself totally. Indeed, she really had no choice. Wendy reached into her pack carefully, so as not to seem aggressive, and retrieved her parcel. She pulled out the letter her mother had written so long ago, to identify her to those who knew and understood the ancient ways. Commander Hewlett took it gently from her and looked it over. His eyes shone intently on her when he looked up. "So you are the great man's niece, are you?" "His niece, yes," replied Wendy. She realized she had been holding her breath and let it go as gently as she could. The saurian stooped to be on her level and turned Wendy's face towards the sun while holding her hair away from her face. Wendy reminded herself not to flinch at the touch of his scaly hand. "Yes, you favor him, especially your eyes," he said softly. "You've met him?" she said, unable to keep the excitement out of her voice. Hewlett stood and chuckled. "Yes, he came to do battle, but left here a dear friend," he said. "I wish I could meet him," said Wendy wistfully. "I only found out that I was related to him a few months ago." "You should go to Raz in Bokenshire," he replied. "He has been aiding King Roloff with the goblin problems there." About half of the guides went back into the cave. The remaining Saurians and Commander Hewlett led them down the left branch of the path to a nearby cluster of buildings, which proved to be a small village. On the approach to the village, they passed a graveyard dominated by a pyramid tomb. "Who is buried there?" asked Tanner. "Tachek the Wanderer," said one of their Saurian guides, "and a human sage who befriended him in time of need." Many of the buildings in the village had raised platforms built near them. When asked, the guides replied that these were places to get more sun. They went on to say that Saurians were not from these cold climates and had to soak up as much sun as they could to compensate. "I thought Saurians came from the great northern swamp," said Dram. "How is it you are not from cold climates?" "We are from Soshire," replied the guide blandly. "We would be unable to survive for long in the northern swamps." "Where is Soshire?" asked Dram. "You call it Menodoc," said another guide. They found little to say after that. Once in the village, they were led to a large building which proved to be an inn. The Saurian villagers noticed them without staring, as if they had been expected somehow. The interior of the inn proved to be bright and colorful. A cheerful proprietor set them down cups of tea and bowls of fragrant stew. He retreated behind the bar once they had been served. Wendy marveled at how graceful and polite all these Saurians were. "Here you will be able to rest and see to your personal needs before your interview," said Commander Hewlett. "Interview?" said Wendy, unfamiliar with the word. "Yes," said the Saurian. "We cannot take the words of humans at face value. You, of course," he indicated Croton the dwarf, "are welcome, as are all your people. Oh, and you," he added, suddenly seeming to notice Leo. "What about us?" interjected Cilio. "Much as we would like to welcome again our gnome friends," said Commander Hewlett, "you have been under the sway of humans for so long that we must be cautious. But please accept our hospitality in the meantime." His gesture included the whole group. He bid them rest well and left with the guides. They were all given rooms for the night and rested, despite their worry, with unaccustomed comfort and privacy. To Wendy's delight, hot baths were part of the hospitality in this valley of surprises. She soaked away some of her grief. She could not remember how long it had been that she had not had a good bath. The rooms, although small, were clean and comfortable, with real beds and windows with views of the village. They all slept better than they had in months. After a breakfast of odd but tasty oatcakes and fruit, they waited with some apprehension to see what was meant by interview. It sounded like interrogation to Wendy. Cilio and Filio did not help the apprehension with their dire speculations and colorful theories. Shortly, two guards arrived, accompanying an obviously important Saurian, who walked up to where they were gathered around a few tables. "Ah, there you are," he stated with every evidence of friendly confidence. "I believe it is customary to inquire how you rested and what you think of our traveler's house," he stated with a smile. He pulled up a bench near Sard and sat down. The guards remained standing. The conversation went on to include almost the whole group, and seemed to be just the exchange of pleasantries, until the Saurians caught Sard trying to talk around his military career. "But you mentioned an army friend just a moment ago. How can you not be military?" he inquired. "Oh, by that I mean that we worked for the army together," Sard replied, obviously trying to be evasive. "So you worked for the army of Tor, but you were not enlisted? Do you mean as laborers, or were you mercenaries?" The Saurian tried to get Sard to clarify. Sard dithered and muttered for a while, and finally broke down and told his tale of his father buying him a commission in the Falcon Legion, only for Sard to be framed for theft by another Legion soldier, and convicted by a commander who did not like him. He swore that he was not and never had been a thief. "Your friend here is a thief, though," said the Saurian. "Do you not approve of him?" Smoke looked startled. No one had mentioned his being a thief until now. Oh, most thieves are all right in their way, Sard replied. Smoke has proven himself to be a true friend. Certainly he has never taken anything from our group that I know of. I just do not like being made to look a fool for somebody else's crime. So it is the dishonesty, not the accusation of a crime, that angers you? The Saurian inquired shrewdly. I suppose so. I've never really examined it like that before. Yes, yes. It is the dishonesty and the pretense that make me so mad. They knew full well that they were just setting me up as a fool and a mark to take the blame just because they didn't like me. At this point, Sard's emotions threatened to get the better of him, and the Saurian turned to Smoke, getting the same results. After trying to be clever, Smoke wound up telling his life story. The Saurian learned about the fruit seller's stall, the human fence, and his framing Smoke to get rid of him. He also learned about the betrayal by Bane. Windy began to see why Sard often held greater feelings for those misused than most men, also why Smoke was so quiet for a gnome, at least compared to the gnomes she had met in the sanctuary, and why he had become a thief. Histories really do give one understanding. Cilio and Filio interrupted each other so much that the guards were forced to restrain them as the interviewer went on to the others. Tennard held out the longest, but eventually he too revealed his life story. So it went with each of them, the first part of the interview seeming to be just friendly banter, then returning to each and getting far more than the subject intended. Even the men-at-arms proved to have colorful backgrounds. Groton and Leo were noticeably passed over. Midgie was asked questions that informed the listener as to how she had been treated and what she thought of the group. Also, what she liked to eat, who had the prettiest hair, what her favorite color was, and how much she liked playing with the Baron's toys. Finally, he took a seat across from Windy and said, I apologize, Lady Spoven, for making you wait until last, but I wanted you to see what manner of people you have been traveling with before we spoke. Oh, I'm not Lady Spoven, said Windy. If anything, my mother would be Lady Spoven. No, said the Saurian, it does not work like that. Your mother passed you the lady's ring of House Spoven. Unless you return it, or another ring is struck, you are the Lady Spoven, keeper of the lady's ring of House Spoven. Windy tried to swallow and found her mouth dry. Being the daughter of a lady was shock enough. Now she would have to become a noble lady and learn the ways of court. She did not think she would ever be as gentle and graceful as these Saurians she found herself amongst. Oh, I wish I could learn to be a noble like you Saurians. She had meant to say it to herself, but in her flusterment it came out aloud. The Saurian studied her before answering. That is a very generous offer. Do you mean it as you said it? Windy thought about what she had blurted out and asked, Is that improper? I did not mean to offend you. Oh, we are in no way offended. In fact, we of Sharrow would be delighted and honored to help you with your education and training as a noble. It would be quite the advantage for our struggles to see our ancestral rights restored. You clearly have no idea what a boon you have offered in your innocent request. He seemed genuinely pleased and excited, while the heretofore immovable guards now whispered together in their sibilant language. Windy hoped that she had not made some helpless blunder, and sat very still. Then his remark about ancestral rights gave her another thought. But wait, is not the House Spoven illegitimate? While Henry sits the throne of Tor, he does not recognize us as nobles. That is true, Lady Spoven, but runners report that the thrones of Sersha and Thanet have stated that they recognize you as Lady Spoven. Other kingdoms will no doubt concur. Besides this fact, Henry does not sit the throne of Tor. He and his entire court were consumed in a cataclysm of their own devising. The shocked looks from around the table told the Saurian how unprepared they were for this news. You have not kept up in touch with your homeland? Windy responded, Only Tennard has means to communicate back to Tor, and he has not been able to contact his people. The Saurian noticed a messenger waiting and gestured him to his side. They whispered together for a long time, and the messenger ran out. The Saurian stood up, looking serious and concerned, and said, "We must assist you in completing your mission, for Tor needs all the leaders that can be mustered in this chaos. I can say that the Hostar College is intact. What has become of the teaching staff and students we do not know. Riston City is no more. It seems that the after effects of the cataclysm have blocked magical communications, and only runners can bring accurate news from Tor. Now I am told that not only have the king and his court been consumed, the Taurian military high command is now missing as well. Tor's defensive forces are almost completely leaderless. Some nobles are mobilizing such forces as they can, but they are too few and have no central leadership. Because of the urgent need of a king in Tor, not only for the sake of that kingdom, but for all our sakes, we will help to get you to Luffa and Prince Frederick. For I foresee much chaos and resistance to the return of the old Tor royalty and nobility to by the remaining authorities. I will send a message to General Randon to join us." Wendy could hardly believe the turn of events. What was happening back home? Were her parents and Robert all right? And what about Oliver? The Saurian looked at Tanner. "We will find some new companions for you, so that you may complete your mission. For we know that the evil that threatens Payton is somehow connected with us and must be stopped." He stood and addressed the whole group. "Enjoy your stay with us and consider yourselves our guest. Please enjoy all that our village has to offer." He bid them good day and left with the guards. The group gathered around and discussed what all this might mean. Each looked at the others with newly opened eyes. The keeper of the traveler's house, whose name was Quiche, brought them tea and sweetbreads. A door flew open, and a Saurian cook chased Midgie out. Both Saurians laughed at the sight of Midgie, covered in soot and holding a bowl of some sweet pudding she had taken. The laughter helped to ease the tension after the startling news.